जान छूट जाए नहीं, पढ़ना चाहता है नहीं बच्चा, क्या देश का होगा समझ नहीं आता है। कर दो। ऊपर से कनेक्टर लिया हुआ है, टेढ़ा ना कर दे मेरा, तो कोई पॉइंट टेढ़ा भी हो गया है क्या? कनेक्टर ले आओ ऊपर से।
सर इसमें का तो सही है क्लास का, काम नहीं करता है।
झटका मत लगाना गरीब आदमी सिस्टम में।
ले
ले आओ कर ले आओ।
Hey guys, this is Amit from Enquiry. Welcome to this session on cloud computing technology. Guys, this is a live session and it is meant for people who are new to the cloud computing industry. Right, so I'm going to start with the basics today. I'm going to discuss cloud computing from scratch, and I hope you enjoy this session today. Right, so let's go ahead and start the agenda to see what all we'll be covering in today's session. So guys, this is our agenda. We'll start with why do we actually need cloud computing, and then move on to see what is cloud computing exactly. After that, we're going to see what are the different cloud models which are there in cloud computing. Moving on, we'll look at cloud providers. So cloud providers are the companies that provide you with the cloud services, right? Once we're done with that, we'll move on to the hands-on part where we will launch a first server in the cloud. We will try to deploy it in AWS and in Azure as well, right? So guys, this is our agenda for today. I hope it's clear to you. Some things that I'd like to mention, guys. Any doubt you have during the session, please comment it in your comment box. Here to help you out in that. All right. So with that, let's start.
Kumar सुनाई पड़ रहा है आप लोगों को?
Which is why.
Yes, sir.
All right. So let's understand this using an example. Say you want to host a website, right? And say there is no cloud computing right now, right? And you want to host a website. How would you do that? So first, you would have to buy a stack of servers, right? You need servers to host your website on. After that, you have to keep the peak traffic in mind. Now, what is peak traffic? Peak traffic is basically the traffic which comes for a shorter duration. For example, you can expect the most traffic between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. because that is the time when people are the most free, right? So there's a peak traffic, and after 10 p.m. the traffic can decline. So when your traffic booms, you have to have the servers to manage them, right? And after 10 p.m. if the traffic declines, these servers that you have deployed to handle your traffic become idle, right? So you have to get maximum servers so that you don't get any problems when the traffic goes up in a peak, right? After that, since you have these many servers, you have so many servers, you have to continuously monitor and maintain them, because you don't want your website to experience a downtime, right? So you have to continuously monitor them and maintain them so that your website is up and running,
बच्चे सब मैंने
right?
काम की तैयारी में लग गए हैं सर,
So
क्या लगता है
the
तुम्हें?
setup that is without cloud computing had some
कैसे कर रहा है?
disadvantages. Let's see what were
सबसे
the
इलाज भागने नहीं कर
disadvantages.
सकता है।
Right, so first of all, the setup was very expensive because you are buying servers on your own, right? And servers, guys, are not cheap, they're very expensive, right? So the setup was very
समझ में आ
expensive.
रहा है?
Also, since you're
बड़ा
troubleshooting
समझ जी,
problems on your own, that is,
मेरे सामने या
you're
सब
maintaining your
सब कुछ
servers, you're
करेंगे,
monitoring them at the same time,
करें?
right? So these problems could be tedious and they can conflict with your business goals. What I mean by that is, if you have someone to handle your servers, then you can actually focus on how you can expand your application. But if half of the time you're worried whether your website.
Hi there, welcome to this brand new learning video called Cloud Computing Tutorial. I'm Samuel, a multi-platform cloud architect and trainer working for Simply Learn. Let's dive deep into the topics we're going to discuss here. Why we needed cloud
यूनिवर्सिटी
computing
बंद
to
है,
begin with, and what is cloud computing and different types of cloud computings available at the moment. And we also are going to talk about dominant cloud providers available in the market at the moment. And we will touch a few topics or scenarios on life cycle of a cloud computing solution, and we will be talking about how cloud computing is implemented in AWS. And there's nothing like visually seeing how things work in the cloud, right? So we're going to end it with a demo, and we're going to talk about products, or we're actually going to use products like EC2 and S3, EC2 being a virtual computer in the cloud and S3 being an object storage in the cloud. Let's understand about why cloud computing was needed. What was the problem that we had that cloud computing solved, and since then it took over the market. Let's understand that first, and that will solve a lot of unanswered questions about cloud computing or services that you might have. Here on the left, we have an owner of a business, and he wants to set up an DZ or have an IT infrastructure for his company. So he called Paul, an IT educated person in his company, and consulted him about how to go about setting up an IT infrastructure. Now, Paul is the kind of guy who keeps himself updated about what's happening in the IT industry, and he frequently goes through learnings about the recent technology. So without missing a beat, Paul suggested, why not set up the
क्या हुआ अगर कोई अगर आप कंपनी खोलना चाह रहे हो, वी आर गोइंग टू ओपन ए न्यू कंपनी, पूछ रहा है भाई रिसोर्सेस कहाँ से आएंगे, रिसोर्स प्रोवाइडर कौन होगा? क्लाउड कंप्यूटिंग इज ए कंसेप्ट टू प्रोवाइड द रिसोर्स, प्रोवाइड द रिसोर्स, ये तो है। हमको कुछ खोलना है, कुछ चाहिए, तो हमें सब कुछ है लेकिन ऑन रेंट है, खरीदना नहीं, खरीदने की मार्केट है ही।
environment in the cloud. But his manager was not sure about what is cloud, and more than trying to understand what cloud is, he was curious about the benefits of cloud over having an DC locally. So Paul started to explain the very same thing I'm going to explain to you now. Let's start with the expenditure or the billing model. With cloud, the billing model is pay as you go type, meaning we use less and pay less, and we use more and we pay less per unit. On the other hand, in on-premises, we can't expect that. We pay everything upfront, and there is an additional operating cost, and it never lets us to dynamic.
ऑन प्रीमिसेस में हायर पे, प्रीमिसेस में लाके कोई चीज करेगा कोई आदमी आपके लिए, ज्यादा उसको पे करना पड़ेगा कि नहीं? और एक है क्लाउड कंप्यूटिंग के थ्रू, अगर ज्यादा स्पेस है तो ज्यादा पे, कम पे तो कम पे।
Scale. In on-premises, a lot of space is required for seating the servers, but in the cloud, not such space requirement is needed for the organization. In on-premises, we also need a dedicated team to manage the hardware and software, but in the cloud, no such dedicated team is needed for most of the services. They all get managed by the provider. And even if we need to manage them, the provider gives us options to manage them through the console, which is lot simpler than managing directly from the device. In the on-premises, we need to admit the fact that data security is poor due to the cost involved in procuring the hardware and software to provide the security. But in the cloud, the security standards are high due to the investments the providers have done to secure the data and to meet the compliance. In traditional DC, there will generally be less focus on data recovery, and we kind of settle for less when it comes to data recovery due to the cost involved and the effort involved in replicating the data. And even if we set up an high performing data replication, a lot more can be done in the cloud for the same cost. The on-premises environment lacks the flexibility needed today. Like if I need to restructure the IT for the new age business needs, then the on-premises is not so friendly for such changes. But in the cloud, I can easily undo or tear down an environment or migrate to the new environment and tear down the old environment in few button clicks. Now, looking at the number and the frequency of the releases that happen, scheduling updates would be a full-time job. But with cloud, the updates happen automatically. In on-premises, if I'm working with a team that is spread across the globe, working with them in unison and sharing the data is a tedious work. But with the cloud, there are a lot of tools and technologies put together that makes it easy to share the data with other members in the team or with the new prospective customer. In on-premises, if I'm working with a team that is spread across the globe, working with them in unison and sharing the data is a tedious work. But with the cloud, there are a lot of tools and technologies put together that makes it easy to share the data with other members in the team or with a new prospect customer I will be working with who is present across the other side of the globe. In on-premises, the data will be present inside the DC or inside the on-premises DC, and even a valid user trying to access the data from outside the organization is a tough task. But with the cloud, as long as someone has internet, providing the person access is just a few mouse clicks away. Talk about implementation. Building an on-premises DC takes time. I was working on a project a few years back, and the goal to make a DC go live at that time was after 2 years from the date we were speaking about it. But with the cloud, we can bring our DC in the cloud within weeks. After all this explanation and comparisons and talking about benefits, Paul's manager was fully enlightened and wants to have his IT environment in the cloud. But our Paul is not done yet, and he took his manager through another level of discussion about the cloud, just like I'm going to take you now. So let's talk about what is cloud computing. Now, cloud computing is the ability to deliver on-demand computing service over the internet, and that too on a pay-as-you-go basis. Now,
क्या समझ गए? क्लाउड कंप्यूटिंग इज द डिलीवरी ऑफ ऑन डिमांड कंप्यूटिंग सर्विसेज ओवर द इंटरनेट ऑन ए पे एज यू गो. ये मैं गलत बताया था? क्लास में सही बताया था? सही बताया.
Now, you might think, well, what does that mean? Let me explain. Now, with cloud, rather than managing files on local storage devices, cloud computing makes it possible to save them over the internet and access them from the internet. So I can be a mobile person, moving from place to place, but I can access the storage from the internet because it's in the internet. And if I want to give access to somebody else, again, it's easy for me to give access to them as long as they have internet connection available with them. Now let's move further and talk about or get understanding on the types of cloud computing. We can categorize the different types of cloud computing based on two wide categories, one being a deployment model and the other one being service model. Let's talk about the deployment model first. Deployment model is categorized into three types. First one is public, and then private, and then hybrid cloud. In other words, public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud. It'll be easy for me to explain, and also it'll be easy for you to understand if I walk you through this example. Consider the different types of vehicles we use to commute from one place to another. For example, if I want to travel, I can pick a bus which is accessible to anyone. I get in and I pay for the seat that I occupy and I pay for the time that I will be traveling in it and I'm done. Cost is very less here. A similar kind of thing happens in the public cloud. I pay only for the resource that I use and I pay for how long I use it. If I use less, I pay less. If I use more, I pay more for that month. Simple. On the other hand, private cloud is like buying your own car and using it for commuting purpose. Here, I pay a huge amount upfront and it is all owned only by me. I do not pay for it in an hourly fashion, but completely and all upfront. The cost here is very huge. And thirdly, if I want the best of both types, like the comfort of the own car and still don't want to pay all upfront, otherwise want only to pay for the time that I use the service, I can rent a car. Similarly, I can have it in a hybrid environment, meaning if I already have a DC, I can integrate it with the cloud and use both the DCs, and that would become an hybrid environment. All right, so that was good of an learning. Let's summarize the types of cloud based on deployment models. And as we know now about the public cloud is an cloud infrastructure that's made available to the general public over the internet, and it is owned by the cloud provider. Some of the major players as cloud providers are AWS, Microsoft Azure, IBM's Blue Cloud, and Sun Cloud. And private cloud? Now, this cloud infrastructure is exclusively operated by a single organization. It can be managed by organizations or third party and may exist on premises or off premises, doesn't matter. But the point here is this is exclusively operated for a single organization. And some companies that provide private cloud are AWS and VMware. And hybrid cloud gives the best of both public and the private cloud. For example, the federal agencies, they opt for
आपको
private cloud.
बताओ नीतू और राज, पब्लिक प्राइवेट और हाइब्रिड क्लाउड में डिफरेंस बताओ।
प्राइवेट
हाइब्रिड
पब्लिक मतलब वो सही इसमें एवरी मतलब कोई भी एक्सेस कर सकता है, एक्सेसिबिलिटी होगा ठीक है,
जैसे बस है,
बस हो गया। और प्राइवेट क्लाउड में हो गया सर जिसमें सिर्फ सिंगल एक ही कोड कर सकता है,
जैसे रिजर्व करके गाड़ी चलते हैं या अपनी गाड़ी है,
जैसे अपना गाड़ी खरीदती है वो हो गया प्राइवेट। और हाइब्रिड क्लाउड हो गया जैसे टैक्सी और स्टूडेंट का
शेयरिंग में भी चल सकते हैं।
कर सकते हैं।
समझ गए नीतू?
Clouds for storing and developing personal data, and they use public cloud to share the non-sensitive data with the general public or with other government departments. Now let's talk about different clouds based on the service model. If
जैसे मैं लाइव एग्जांपल बता रहा हूँ आप लोग को, हम लोग की मेल आईडी जीमेल पे बनी हुई है पहले से 10 साल हो गए, 10 साल से ऊपर हो गए। मेरी 2004 में बनी थी, 17 साल हो गए। अब इस कॉलेज में मैं यूज करता हूँ amit.kr@CIMAGE.in मेरा मेल आईडी है, लेकिन ये किसका ले रखा है? इसने भी गूगल से पूछ रहा है।
इसके बाद क्लास में
एग्जाम हुआ इसलिए बाइंड अप कर हैं, लैब चले जाना फिर और क्या है। ठीक एग्जाम है, ठीक है।
if we need to
2 मिनट कर देते हैं
आप लोग
categorize them broad,
अब आप समझ गए। जीमेल तो गूगल क्या है? क्लाउड प्रोवाइडर है। गूगल क्या है?
5 मिनट में चीज करके निकल गई।
गूगल क्या हुआ? क्लाउड प्रोवाइडर हुआ। सीमेज ने क्या लिया? सीमेज इज पेइंग फॉर दैट। देखा, मैं मेल तुमको दिखाता हूँ जरा। अब तुम बच्चों को बता भी सकते हो, दूसरे को बता सकते हैं ना।
यस
gmail.com जीमेल आईडी सीमेज का है, लेकिन है किसका?
जीमेल क्या मतलब?
जीमेल क्या हुआ इसके लिए? सीमेज को स्पेस दे रखा है कि आप मेरे मेल आईडी को यूज कीजिए। आपको मैंने 50 GB 100 GB स्पेस दे दिया, लेकिन मेन इस पे क्लाउड कौन होगा?
जीमेल होगा सर।
गूगल।
हाँ
गूगल का तो जीमेल है,
वही ओनर हो गया सर।
तो गूगल इनसे क्या लेता होगा? साल में जरूर 1-8 लाख रुपया, 50 जो भी जिस पे बात आपकी बन जाए। लाइव एग्जांपल क्लाउड का है कि हमने अपना जीमेल बनाया नहीं, अपनी मेल आईडी को खड़ा किया नहीं, कुछ किया नहीं, लेकिन हम मेल अपना यूज कर रहे हैं। दिस इज क्या बेटा? 5 मिनट रुक जाओ, 5 मिनट
गूगल क्लाउड सर
हो गया ना। बच्चे पूछ रहे थे, देखो कि चीजें तब अब कहाँ से लग दे देंगे, ये चीजें ना है।
यस
जीमेल सीमेज का है, लेकिन सीमेज का है नहीं। सीमेज इसको रेंट पे लिया हुआ है, या उतना जगह कि भाई हम 2 साल 4 साल 10 साल 15 साल रेंट पे या कुछ कम पैसे में परचेज या जो भी हुआ होगा, रेंट ही लेता है ज्यादातर। हाँ, ये हुआ लाइव एग्जांपल ऑफ क्लाउड कंप्यूटिंग। कोई दिक्कत है?
नो सर।
ठीक है, अटेंडेंस बनाओ, जल्दी जाओ क्योंकि नेक्स्ट क्लास किसका है? अब जाके जब ठंडा हुआ तो क्लासे खत्म हो गया, मेरा दिमाग पक गया एकदम। इस मामले में ये मेंटेन रखता है, आया एसी ऑन है तो पढ़ने में अच्छा लगता है। कौन सा क्लास है आपका?
BSc-IT Course 5.
आज पहली क्लास हुई ना बहुत दिन के बाद, बस अटेंडेंस बना। एक सेकंड
आप लोग
अरे अरे एक मिनट। और सीड कुमार का क्या है? ठीक है, 10, 12, 13। 10 पहला बच्चा 10 है ना? सियासी सीट अभी क्या करूं, कैसे पढ़ाई हो ऐसे में। हम ना फंस जाए। नहीं हुआ क्या? हड़बड़ी में ही सब गड़बड़ी हो जाता है।